present value actually moves closer to what you will actually repay. And at the moment, or as I wrote in the question, a moment or two before you actually pay the debt, that's when the present value of the debt increases or decreases to what you will actually pay. And so in those moments when you're getting ready to pay, and at the moment that you actually pay, the present value of the debt and the amount of the debt on your general ledger is precisely $100. Okay, a typical installment note is a mortgage loan, a normal mortgage loan on your home mortgage, where every cash payment, including interest and principal, is exactly the same amount. And the last question is a reiteration of the basic principle. The liability in the general ledger, the value of long-term debt, which is also the value on the balance sheet, is always equal to the present value. And that concludes our review of the quiz. Any questions? Going once? Going twice? And a moment of triumph, we have completed our 20th quiz. And because there are 5 questions or 5 points per quiz, you have now completed 100% of your course grade from a course grade perspective, which means that if you add up the scores of the 20 quizzes that you've taken so far, and you're happy with how it converts to your course grade, you do not need to do anything else at all this semester in this class from a grading perspective. Now, if you say, but hold on, Mike, we have not yet covered every last inch of our textbook material because there are 3 more illustrations that you're going to cover today. Well, that's perfectly true. And thus, if you want to cover every last inch of our textbook this semester from a learning perspective, even though you have completed your 20th quiz, you do have to listen for a little while longer as we go through today's lesson. Okay, now, in addition, we have yet another exciting moment, which is to say, I am going to try to record the class session of our review of these last 3 illustrations. And because these last 3 illustrations of the textbook, which we're about to review, will be the subject of Thursday's quiz, I'm going to record the portion that we will quiz on Thursday. And I'm doing it now because I take things one step at a time. You guys were all perfectly fine on that final chapter for which I recorded in advance the material. And so I'm going to take this next step. If you're wondering, will I actually start from scratch and go slowly through each of these steps next semester? No. Because I'm new to the school, I wanted to take and because I have no faith, no faith in the technology at all. And because I've had, as you know, issues just getting answers to questions administratively, I've been taking it one step at a time. But at least for you guys, we have finally reached the point, better late than never, maybe, where I will record the live class session. If it works, and I think at this point, I know how to avoid any problems, I will download the video from Zoom immediately after the class session when I log off from Zoom. If it works, I will then upload it to my Instructure account, and I will put the link to the video on the home page of our course in Canvas. Okay, the home page is the first page that I believe you see when you log on to Canvas. It actually has the Zoom login codes and some other miscellaneous information. I will put the link there. Okay, so any questions on that so far? Okay, great. Shafai, go right ahead.
Will we have any extra credits?
For the course, hold that thought a little bit because I am going to address that in about 2 minutes. So thank you for the segue, but just hold on for 2 minutes or so. And the reason why I have to ask you to hold on is because I'm about to record a live class quiz under federal law. I have to issue a warning and an invitation. So I'll do that verbally right now, and I will document it on the homepage where I put the link to the recording. Some of you may know this. Some of you may remember this from the pandemic when we all went to recordings of class lessons, but students have rights to privacy. And so, for instance, if someone wanted to take a live recording, like a video of students in the classroom, they could not post live recordings of students in the classrooms anywhere without getting their permission in advance. And the same is true of online teaching. If any teacher ever took a picture of you when you were on Zoom and on camera, and let's say posted that picture on social media, look at my happy students learning accounting. Don't they look like they're having fun, et cetera, et cetera? They're actually breaking federal privacy laws without getting everyone's approval in advance. So I need to tell you verbally, I am about to record on Zoom the lesson. Of course, cameras are off, so I don't need to worry about recording your faces on Zoom on the recording. But if anyone asks a question while I am recording, which I am happy to answer, the recording of your voice will be on Zoom and will be recorded for other people to hear after the fact. If you are concerned about that, then you are still welcome to hang out immediately after class and ask me your questions afterwards. Or if you shoot me an email message and say, hey, Mike, for whatever reason, I was not available after class, but I had verbal questions while you were recording, and I didn't want people to hear my voice, then I will answer your questions for that reason afterwards. As you can see, I just want to make this point. I know that plenty of teachers simply record Zoom sessions, record your voices, record your faces, and just make it available for you. If they don't go through this process, they are breaking federal law, and they are breaking UH's interpretation of federal law. And so, since this is, I promise you, I won't go through this every time in these remaining sessions that I do this. But I did want to do it the first time to explain to you what is happening, why it's happening, and on top of that, why I've been so careful to figure out what UH does, what is going on, etc. One final point, I have no doubt that some of you are recording these sessions on your own devices, even though you shouldn't. If you are recording these sessions on your home devices, then actually you are in violation of federal law. And of course, like anything else, if no one catches you, then you might think, okay, no big deal. If you are caught, you are in violation of federal law, and it is something to at least think about before you decide to do it. Okay. Finally, a quick comment. Anything can go wrong with the recording process or the uploading of the recording or the connection of the link from Canvas to the recording. If something does go wrong, then we can't repeat the session, or, well, you know what I mean. We will still go forward with the quiz. I don't think anything will go wrong, but the recording process itself may or may not work. It will not slow us down. Okay, any questions about that? And since there was a lot there, let me go through my going once, going twice, and okay. Other announcements. Okay, and Shafai, thank you for being patient. I just wanted to get through that up front. So, what happens when we complete our discussion of the last 3 illustrations today? Well, on Tuesday, we'll take our quiz on the last 3 illustrations. It will be quiz 21. What happens then? We do have an extra credit activity. What is the extra credit activity? Well, if you remember, we've just talked about contingent liabilities, which are some of the most complicated and uncertain, and I personally think, therefore, interesting liabilities there are, because they are liabilities that you may or may not find remote, as in you have no expectation to pay it, or you think they're reasonably possible to pay, or you think that there's more than a reasonable possibility that you will pay it. And as we just learned, based on whether or not there's a liability out there that you've identified and quantified, but that you think is remote or reasonably possible or relatively likely that you will pay, when we went through the accounting for that, you basically, and it was perfectly appropriate for intermediate accounting, you basically said, I'm just going to memorize, if payment of a liability is reasonably possible, this is what I do. If it's more than reasonably possible or relatively likely, I do something else. If it's remote, meaning it's not reasonably possible that I will pay it, I do something else. And what happened was you accepted those phrases without naturally thinking about what they mean. I mean, what's the threshold? When does a debt and okay, well, whoever inadvertently unmuted, just remuted, and so I thank you for that. Took me a second to find the mute button. But anyway, back to my point. The question, good question, is when does a liability that is reasonably possible to pay become likely? Or when does it go the other way? When is a debt that is reasonably possible that you'll have to pay it become remote? And is there anything in between? Furthermore, if that is an issue on the debt side, is there an issue, well, I'm sorry, on the liability side, is there an issue on the asset side? Are there assets that you might own that have terminology connected to them in terms of how you value them? But frankly, your understanding of what the asset is worth, is it possible that we have assets where there's this language about the ability of that I have to recognize the value in an asset is remote? No, wait, it's reasonably possible that I'll recognize the value of this asset. No, wait, it's likely. Well, on the asset side, there are these terms and definitions as well. And they're actually pretty likely to what we see on the liability side. And they actually serve as a nice segue from 3367 to 3368. 3368, although it is a 3000 level class, is the last financial accounting class you take at the undergraduate level if you're an accounting major. I guess it's the fourth financial accounting class that you get, and you start getting a taste of some more complex, but I think more interesting accounting issues like that. And so, beginning a week from today, right after we take our last quiz on textbook material, I am going to spend the remainder of our time together, the last 4 class sessions, on extending our discussion of contingent liabilities to what are basically contingent assets. We'll continue taking our final quizzes, although keep in mind at this point, the quizzes that we're taking are essentially potential substitutions of the first 20 quizzes. And on top of that, I believe on Thursday next week, we're scheduled to take quiz 23. By that point, because we'll be all done, I might schedule a double quiz on Thursday of next week, quizzes 23 and 24, to cover the final material that we'll review a week from today. Okay, that's a lot of different things to talk about. So to summarize, number one, we have completed our 20th quiz. We're about to complete our final 3 illustrations of the textbook. Then whether it's from a quiz perspective or it's a coverage of textbook perspective, you're done. But I do want to offer 4 additional quizzes so that you can substitute them for quizzes that you've taken if you wish. I also want to cover some material that both helps you segue into 3368, gives you something that I personally think is pretty interesting, and that will provide the content for a little bit of extra credit. It looks like the extra credit that will be approved is 3 points, the same as last semester. That might turn out to be what they approve for me every semester. So it'll be 3 points of extra credit covering material that we will learn over the last week of the semester, if you will, the last couple of weeks or so. And that's what we have in store through the end of the term. Okay, any questions at all about any of our plans? Ala, go right ahead. I'm sorry, I think you said your dad's
Sorry,
name
I
is
keep
Ala
forgetting.
and you are Dawn.
Right.
Sorry, Dawn. I am
that's-
learning, albeit slowly. Go right ahead.
So the quizzes, and this is something I've kind of been confused about for a while. The quizzes are the extra credit. Is that what it
No.
is?
No, so the
Oh,
quizzes will be available to substitute for quizzes you've ever already taken, because you'll be taking a total of 24 quizzes, but I'll only count 20.
okay.
However, the material on these last few quizzes will also be the basis of a 3-point extra credit.
Great, thank you.
Sure, sure. Other questions about any of this information?
Can you repeat what you said about the extra credit or the 3 points?
Yeah, 3 points of extra credit. It will be a light assignment. I'll actually start talking about it as soon as we start talking about the extra material, which will be this Thursday. So you'll have I'll formalize it this weekend, but it'll be a light written assignment, and it will be due not this Sunday at 11:59 p.m., but a week from this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. And again,
So,
light assignment.
so that's worth 3% of our grade.
Yep, extra 3 points, exactly, or 3%, exactly. Shimon, go right ahead. And Shimon,
Hi, I had a, yes,
ahead.
I had a question regarding, you said in the beginning of the semester that you would take down 4 of the quizzes. Are you referring to that the 4 quizzes that we're supposed to take now, the extra 4 quizzes are going to replace that? Or are you still taking down the 4 quizzes?
Right. So the reason why the terminology has changed a bit is because as I've gone through the semester, I've learned more about the terminology that the department prefers that I use. And the department actually prefers that I refer to 20 quizzes and then 4 extra quizzes, if you will. That's not exactly right if you think about the way that I'm going around the measurements. Because the way that I'm going about the measurements is to say, okay, you're taking 24 quizzes, and I'm just going to ignore the lowest 4. And so any quiz, counts towards the 24 that I'm going to look at when I see or when I choose the 20 best ones. So in a way, it's not like the last 4 are the extra ones and the first 20 are the regular ones, because I'm just going to look at all 24 in an equal way and ignore the 4 that are the lowest and take the 20 that are the highest. And so that's why, to answer your question directly, yes, I'm talking about the same quizzes and the same process. And the process itself has not evolved since the beginning of the semester. It's the same process that I spoke about at the beginning of the semester. I am just using slightly different words because as I describe what I am doing to the program, I do have to refer to the 20 regular quizzes or standard quizzes and the 4 additional or substitutable ones. One last comment. It's also not exactly true, or maybe a little misleading, to say something like what I just said. Hooray, you have finished 20, the 20 mandatory ones, you can be done with the semester. Because if you had taken the first 19, and if you had just decided, hey, based on the first 19, I have a grade that I want course-wise, do I have to take number 20? No. I mean, for all of them, all 24 quizzes, if you take them, you get the grade that you earn. If you don't take one of them, you get a grade of 0. And so it's even a little bit, I feel, misleading, but consistent with the program's language to refer to the 20th quiz as being some type of milestone. In a way, it's not. Okay, did that help? I hope I answered your question somewhere in there. And apologies, I'm continuing to give more information than is needed to answer the question. So let me pause for a moment just in case you have a follow-up question to that, in case I missed the boat. Okay. Dawn, I see your hand is still up, but I don't know if that's a follow-up question or, okay. So I think we're good to go. Okay, so let me first share screen. And actually, the reason why I'm pausing for a moment is because it may make sense to not share my entire desktop, but rather to share the textbook in the browser, because that is what I am recording. Okay. So at this point, you should be looking at my Google Chrome browser with a slate blue colored browser outline at the top, and you should be seeing nothing but textbook. So let me pause for a moment. If anyone can't see that, please unmute and say, Mike, that's not what's happening. Okay, so next up, we will be reviewing illustrations 17 to 19. Let me record. Once again, guys, remember, I am recording so that if you ask a question verbally, I can hear your voice and your voice will be recorded. If you'd rather not do that for privacy reasons, I would be more than happy to answer your questions after class or thereafter.
Recording in progress.
And okay. Recording is now on. And I am going to begin my review of illustrations 1417, 1418, and 1419. Now, for the most part, there isn't anything truly new about these three illustrations. However, they do have some vocabulary words connected to them, and the vocabulary words themselves sound a little bit complicated, which is why I thought it best not to rush these last three illustrations into our previous class session, but to give them a class session of their own. So, what's happening here? Well, we have a number of different vocabulary words in illustration 1417. We have early extinguishment of debt. We have another vocabulary word, call price. Those are pretty much the two vocabulary words connected to this illustration. What do they mean? They mean that if a party wishes to pay off the debt early, a party can simply say, I want there to be early repayment of debt. Let's repay it now. And when I say early repayment, I mean repay it in full. Furthermore, if you're thinking, well, what's so special about that? Can't someone pay off their loan early? Well, yeah, they could, but it's usually the borrower that decides, hey, I'd like to pay off a loan early. It's usually not the lender who has the right to do that. But under certain circumstances, the lender might say, I want the right to force you, the borrower, to repay the debt. And if there is a call price provision, meaning a contractual term that allows the lender to require immediate repayment, then the borrower has no choice but to repay. Furthermore, the call price provision will have a specific price attached to it. In other words, it is not necessarily true that the borrower pays whatever he or she owes. It's also not necessarily true that the borrower repays whatever the market says the debt is worth at a certain point in time. The borrower needs to pay whatever he or she has promised to pay in the original contract. What this means is the following. Let's say I lend you money. I lend you $100. And let's say I say to you, I want there to be a call price provision in this debt agreement. I am lending you $100, but I want the right to call the debt and force you to repay me on the debt when the price is 102. Okay, then I have the right to say to you, the debt is 100. You have to repay me 100, but I have the right to force you to pay 102 early. If I put that into the debt, then you'll actually have to pay me 102 more than the price of the debt early. Now you might be thinking, why would anyone actually agree to that? Well, if they're desperate for debt, there are people, I should say, desperate for cash and willing to go into debt. There are some people that will be willing to offer anything. You might say, why would I, as a lender, want that in the agreement? Well, remember, if this is a bond, then I may not care whether or not the borrower can pay. If it's a bond, then I'm just trying to lend the money and then take the bond receivable and I'm going to sell it to someone else. If from the perspective of anyone who might want to buy the receivable, if a call price term of $102 on a debt of only $100, if that's something that might be attractive to someone who might want to buy the debt from me, then it is something that I might put into the debt itself. And so in the debt markets, in the bond markets, everyone has a reason sometimes to agree to terms that look crazy in normal times. If you are a borrower, you might agree to anything. If you are a lender, you might demand anything, even if it looks unfairly aggressive. If it means that someone else that you're going to turn around and sell the receivable to might find it more attractive. In terms of what you need to know for the quiz, early extinguishment basically means that the debt has a feature that allows for the borrower to pay off the loan early. And if the feature happens to be a provision that we call a call price, then the lender has the right to call the debt, which basically means calling the borrower and saying, I am exercising my right to demand that you pay me your money to eliminate the debt immediately at the call price that was called for in our original contract. Now, in terms of what the journal entry looks like, it's actually pretty simple. If you're the borrower, you have to pay the cash, credit cash. You are paying off the loan, and the loan is on your books at whatever the present value is. And so you debit the present value that is on your books, I mean the liability, to eliminate it. Once again, the textbook author makes life a little complicated. Instead of having the liability, the payable at present value, he created a contra payable. So the present value on his books at the moment this payment is made is 700 minus 23,712. And to eliminate the payable, you have to eliminate both the liability by debiting it and the contra liability. Annoying, but still fundamentally, you're paying cash to pay off the loan, credit cash. You're eliminating the liability on your books. So, because you're paying it off, debit payable, and removal or credit of any contra liability. If cash, the asset, is going down by this amount, and if overall the liability is going down by this minus this, or 676, well, if an asset's going down by 685 and a liability is only going down by 676, the value of the company is going down by this amount, and that would be an expense or a loss. Okay, so any questions about illustration 14-17? Okay, and again, for those of you who wish to keep your voice private, I'm more than happy to stick around after class or speak to you at a different time. On to 14-18. Okay, 14-18 introduces words convertible and debentures, and there's a phrase at and then a number that is roughly equal to 100 but not exactly 100. Okay, so 3 vocabulary words: convertible, debentures, and then a number which is at or close to 100 but is not exactly 100. What do they mean? First, we are talking about convertible debt. The word convertible means it is debt, but the lender can contact you. The lender has the right to say, I'm tired of being a lender. I'm tired of holding your debt. I want to convert your bond, your payable, your debt to equity, to stock. Don't repay the debt in cash any longer. Just give me stock in your company. The lender has the right to convert the liability, the debt, or the bond to your stock. Therefore, the debt is called convertible debt. What does the word debenture mean? A debenture is a debt that has no collateral, meaning it's not like borrowing money on a home mortgage where if you fail to make a payment, the bank can take your home, the home being collateral. There is no collateral. Basically, the bank is looking at the credit rating of the borrower and is saying, I am just going to rely on the reputation of the borrower to lend the borrower money. That's what debenture means. When you see that I am lending you money and you see the words at and a number close to 100, then the number close to 100, like 103, refers to how much cash, okay, how much, and I'm coming down into the journal entry, how much cash I'm actually getting up front. Okay. If the issuance of debt is at 103, and if it's a bond, that means that I, the borrower, am going to the bond market and saying, hey, I'm looking to borrow $100 million. Who wants to lend me $100 million? I'm a borrower. I want to borrow $100 million from someone. Who wants to lend me $100 million? And all the different banks on the bond market say, pick me, pick me, pick me. I will lend you $100 million. Well, then, says the borrower, if all of you are willing to lend me $100 million, then maybe one of you is willing to kick in a little more money. Is there anyone out there who is willing to give me? Remember, I am borrowing money, so one of you is going to give me cash and I'm going to repay it. Any of you out there willing to pay me $101 million? Well, why would anyone lend you $101 million if you began this conversation on the bond market by saying, I want to borrow 100? Because I have a lot of competitors out there. There's a lot of people out there that want to lend money to this company. And let's say a bunch of banks say, okay, I will give you an extra million. Think of it as sweetener. If you let me lend you 100, let's call it 101. Well, then, if there are still many different banks who are willing to give me $101 million, when I really only needed 100 million to begin with, I might then say, okay, sounds good. Which of you who might be willing to give me 101 now want to be the one special bank to give me 102? And I just keep going until there's only one bank left. And in this particular situation, there is a bank who said, I will go so far as to give you $103 million, even though you initially proposed borrowing 100 million. That's what this transaction is all about. Now, this 103 has nothing to do with the fact that the loan is convertible to equity, to stock. It has nothing to do, the 103, with the fact that it's a debenture, meaning there is no collateral. The 103 merely has to do with the fact that this borrower or issuer of a bond began by saying, I want to borrow $100 million, but used competition between lenders to basically get the amount of cash they're actually receiving up to 103. Well, in that moment, if they're borrowing $103 million, because that's the amount of money that they're receiving, we debit cash and credit debt for 103. The textbook author, instead of having one bond payable liability account of 103, divided it between two accounts, one of the original 100, one for the extra 3. But at this moment, because there was a bank out there that was actually willing to give you 103, the amount of cash you get is 103, and the value of the debt is the cash that you just got for it, 103. Okay, let me pause for a moment. Any questions about that? Okay. What happens if you get a call and the bank says, guess what? The reason why I was so eager to lend you 103 million instead of 100 is because I can convert the liability to equity. And all along, I really wasn't interested in lending you money. I wanted to own some of your stock. And so I want to exercise my right to convert my bonds to equity. Now, just to mess with you, again, in this example that the textbook author gives you, instead of converting all of the bonds to equity, only half of the bonds are being converted to equity. Well, what happens when you convert bonds to equity? Well, the bonds go away, right? You're giving them up to convert them to equity. And if you remember up here, the original bond payable was 100. The original premium was an extra 3. Half of them go away. And by the way, this one should really be 1.5, half of 3. See, the textbook author says half the balance. Half the balance is actually 1.5. This should be 1.5. Well, okay. You're getting rid of half of the payable because the lender is converting it to stock. So you are telling the lender, who is now a shareholder, congratulations, I am removing the debt from my books, and now I have to issue you your stock. Well, how much is the stock worth? Well, the value of the debt that I'm eliminating from my books is the value that it's worth, 51. Any questions about what's going on? Okay, keep in mind, when you convert debt to equity, you eliminate the debt from your books by debiting it. You're recording the fact that you're replacing it by stock by crediting stock. That's really all you do. Simple. But there are these 3 new vocabulary words that you do need to keep in mind what they mean. Convertible, debentures, and how much cash are you getting up front to begin with from the market? Have you pitted people in the market against each other? Okay, One way to say that you actually managed to get $103 and not just $100 is by writing, I have issued debt at 103. Okay. Questions? Okay. Next up. Final vocabulary word, detachable warrant. What does that mean? Well, a warrant is a coupon. If I borrow money from you, and when I send you the bond, and think about this in the, let's say 80 years ago, before the computer age. If I was borrowing money from you before the computer age, and if you were to say to me, hey, Mike, I want to take the debt and sell it to someone else on the bond market, is it okay if we call this a bond? 80 years ago, I would say, sure. And if you were to say to me, okay, Mike, so you are going to send me a paper bond, I would say, yes, that's how we did things pre-computer. I would actually send you a paper bond. If you were to say to me, hey, Mike, I'll kick in a little extra cash. I know you're borrowing 100 million, but I'll give you 103. I want a coupon to buy stock from you. Now, think about the difference between a coupon and a conversion feature. Under convertible debt, which is what we just talked about, you take your debt and change it into stock. But that means that the debt goes away. It has been changed to stock. Here, with a warrant, the debt doesn't go away. I continue to pay it. But you can take a coupon to buy stock from me at a very attractive price. And you can say at any time, Mike, I am using my coupon. Here is some money unrelated to the underlying debt. Here is some money, send me your stock. That's the difference between a warrant and a conversion function. Both allow the lender to buy stock. But if it's convertible debt, the debt goes away. If it's a detachable warrant, then the debt does not go away at all. And it's just a coupon to buy stock for a cheap price. And the reason why we originally, I mean, as an economy, as the accounting profession goes, the reason why we originally called it detachable warrants is because in the pre-computer age, when I sent you a paper bond, there was actually a little piece of paper sticking out from it that said, warrant, coupon, detach this slip of paper and send it back in an envelope with money, which was often cash, and you will get your stock in the mail. It was just like an old-fashioned paper coupon, you know, attached with those little perforated holes to the original bond. Okay, any questions about that? Okay. How does the accounting work? Actually, not that complicated at all. First of all, I am getting $103 of cash. This is the lender. Debit cash of 103. same as last time. It's just that last time we said, well, if I am getting $103, then the market value of the debt, the present value must be 103, and I credited payable for 103. Here, though, I'm saying, wait a minute. The 103 of cash that I am getting is not just the liability that I am issuing. I'm also issuing warrants. Well, how much are those warrants worth? There are 100 warrants. Each of the 100 warrants has 20 coupons. Each of the 20 coupons is worth $3. And so the number of bonds times the number of warrants per bond times the value of each warrant gives me what the warrants are worth in total. And then I finally say, I'm getting cash. But it's no longer accurate to say, and the cash is worth the debt of 103, because the cash of 103 I'm getting for the debt and for the warrants. Okay. If I'm getting 103 of cash for $6 worth of warrants and the debt itself, then the value of the debt itself is 103 minus 6, or 97. Debit cash 103 is the first thing that you do. Then say, what are the warrants worth? Credit warrants, that's an equity value account for 6. Okay, then I'm getting 103. For warrants that are worth 6, the debt must be worth the remaining 97. Credit debt for 97. And that concludes illustration 14-19. Any questions about this illustration? Going once, up, Dawn, go right ahead.
Okay, so you credit the debt for 97, you said.
That's exactly right. And as always, the textbook author says, well, instead of crediting the debt for 97, I just want to use a contra liability account. So you have to look at both of these accounts and see that they net to 97. But you're basically crediting the payable for 97. Correct. Good question.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? Going once? Going twice? And okay, this concludes our review of the textbook. Hooray! And on that triumphant note, I am going to stop the recording.
Recording stopped.
Okay, my recording has been stopped. I will, if everything goes well, I'll have the recording posted by noontime, actually. And again, I'll put the link to the recording on the home page of Canvas. Just a few final comments. It is a little different, I think, the equation that runs through your mind when you ask yourself, should I ask a question? It's just a little bit different when you're being recorded. And even if you don't feel that way, I'm hoping that you realize that there are some students for which it might feel that way. And on top of that, you have the privacy issue and my scary sounding, there are some federal regulations to worry about. And so one of the reasons why, I was always a little more leery, just on a personal basis, in just saying, I'm just going to record, the sessions and I'm going to put them up in their entirety, because I do know that it can change the vibe of the session for at least some of the people in the class, and not necessarily in a good way. So, if you think that this is the greatest thing that I've ever done, hopefully not, but if you think that way, I mean the recording of the actual class session, then do let me know. I mean, you can tell me after class, you can send me an email, either way, that's fine. Even if you don't think that it stopped your ability to enjoy the class and to learn in it, if you think that there are some concerns in terms of people feeling comfortable asking questions, even if their faces are not being recorded on Zoom, let me know that too. And it would be helpful for me to know. Otherwise, if you think it's a great thing, I just want to thank you for hanging in there all semester as I continued my first year with UH Journey into figuring out what is going on, what the school policy is, what I'm comfortable doing, etc. So with that, for the final time, at least for today, any questions about anything that we have been covering? Going once. Going twice. Lawson, go right ahead.
I mean, I can stick around after class. I just was confused on the vocabulary.
Okay, no,